Hey everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. My name's Olivia Omega. I am your founder track chair and also a member of the organizing committee here at Denver Startup Week. If 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we're more powerful together when we come together. And here we are connecting in a way where we can learn and grow regardless of gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, and the combination of those identities. There's something there's something for everyone here at DSW. Y'all, I am hanging in there. So thank you for bearing with me. And more importantly, thank you for joining us for this super important and informative session on project management. I am going to go ahead and start this session. And I want to let you know that Grace is here live with us. So if you have some questions and comments for her, go ahead and put those into the chat as well as into the Q&A. And bear with me as I get the right video to come up here. All right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project Management for Startups. We are so happy that you are joining us for Startup Week. Organizers of Startup Week, as well as the sponsors. Now, we are here to talk about project management. Project management is simply a way to organize and prioritize your work so that you can create the best products or services for your business and for your customer.
At the beginning of this session, we will talk a little bit about project management, and then we will spend the majority of the time setting you up for an exercise you can complete at a later time, given our time constraints. At the end, we'll provide you with a link to a number of templates you can use in your startup.
Project management can get really complicated. So we are going to take you through a very simple exercise to get you to think about managing work in your venture. At the end of this workshop, we'll also talk through different project management tools that can help you with project management. Now, just an FYI, this workshop is intended for founders who are new to project management, and it will not go deep into different methodologies such as Agile, Scrum, Lean process improvement, etc. Again, that's just due to time constraints. So who are we? My name is Grace Wright, and I teach MBA level entrepreneurship at CSU. And through Wright Ventures, I'm a consultant with startup ventures and mid-stage ventures. I also hold my project management professional certification, and I'm a 3-time business founder.
My name is Jerry Hanley, and I have over 30 years of engineering and project management experience in corporate America. In recent years, I've been consulting with companies on process improvement and project management. I also have a national certification in lean manufacturing and a Six Sigma black belt.
So why this topic? This is the #1 problem that I see in the startups that I work with. As a founder, you are juggling so many priorities: legal foundation, sales, fundraising, marketing, branding, product development. And without a good way to prioritize, organize, and move your work forward, things can become chaotic really quickly, and you can significantly decrease your chance of success. I also think as founders, we are builders, and I don't think it's in many of our natures to organize and plan to a detailed level. Therefore, we either need to find someone on our team that can do that for us, or we have to make sure that we intentionally prioritize in our venture. Otherwise, we will only focus on things that are interesting and fun and pay little attention to things that are important to building an actual business, not just a hobby.
What is project management? In simple terms, it really is just a checklist of things to do so that you don't forget to do them. But it also helps you understand the timing relationships between activities, who is responsible, and helps you track costs project timeline, quality deliverables, scope, team communications, and stakeholder relationships. The end goal is to create better products or services in the most efficient and least costly manner possible.
I think a lot of project management seems very obvious, but people just don't do it. So while much of what we're going to say seems obvious, what you need to do is make sure that you move from the, yeah, I know I should be doing that, to the, yes, I'm actively practicing that in my venture. But I know what you're thinking. Startups are so chaotic. The only thing certain is uncertainty. Any order that we can put around the chaos will help us make it to market, will help us be a unicorn when other businesses just stay small or just stay in that getting started stage. The key is moving forward, being accountable, staying focused on what matters, and ensuring that you are creating things of value for your customer.
So here is why you benefit from focusing on project management in your startup. It will help you with your work prioritization in complex and variable environments. It will help you develop quality product services on time and on budget, and it aids with team coordination and stakeholder management.
Our goal is to help get you from this to this. Quickly, I want you to go right now into your calendar and set out a 2-hour meeting with yourself to get yourself organized and engaged in the following exercise. I promise the time you spend doing this now will pay dividends later. In this exercise, we are going to have you think about project scope, objectives, metrics, milestones, tasks, subtasks, dependencies, timeline, budgeting, roles and responsibility, quality, communication, and active management of your project management plan. This is a lot to cover in 30 minutes, but we hope we have broken it down in a simple enough manner and an approachable manner. One other note before we get started is that this process isn't necessarily sequential. After budgeting, you might realize that you need to go back and adjust your scope. Or while you define tasks, you might identify other milestones. That's totally okay. The point is to make a plan that works for you and works for your enterprise. The first thing we're going to talk about is project scope. Depending on where you are in your startup, you may feel like you have just about everything that you need to do. The starting question with project scope is how much is reasonable to plan for and how far out in advance should you plan? In project management, projects have a start date and an end date. So they aren't things that are ongoing like operations. You use project management to build out something. When we are thinking about scoping our projects, we want our projects to be manageable. You will need to assess what is manageable for you and how far out in advance is reasonable to plan. You might consider scoping in the following ways. One way is by startup phase. You may design a plan around startup phases such as customer discovery, prototyping, testing, etc. This may help you focus on what's really important right now at this time. Another way to consider scoping your project is by most significant need. We will talk about this a bit later, but you will probably want to identify what is most necessary to get you to where you want to be and design your project around that. I can't tell you how many times people don't have a validated customer demand or a product that fits a market need, and they're working on product photography. Identifying your most significant needs right now may help you avoid this problem. Another way to scope is by constraints. These could be timeline, budget, or other things that will confine what you actually build or execute. Your scope could be constrained by certain unknowns. For example, you probably can't plan your project launch until you have finished out design and prototyping. Another option is by design sprint, an agile approach to planning, perhaps with projects that have long development cycles. Super long-term project scope may be a little fuzzier, so some choose to scope projects by identifying what you need to work on for this specific iteration of what you are building. So during your project planning session, take time to reflect. What exactly are you planning for? What is the project scope? And what is a reasonable scope?
Once you have determined the specific project that you are building out, the next step is to identify the objectives and/or deliverables that you aim to achieve or produce as a result of your project. To begin, I would think about outlining broad goals. These are general guidelines or things you aspire to, or benefits to be achieved by a certain date. An example of an objective would be to get early user input. Next, you determine how you actually measure progress or quality of achieving that goal. Objectives are specific and measurable and are broken down into an action. What is to be improved and changed? A specific measurable change expected or impact, and the target date or time frame. For example, we will conduct 50 30-minute user interviews in the next 30 days with the goal of identifying 9 pain points and 3 version improvements. The metrics need to be SMART. That is, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Once you have identified your metrics, in this case, 50 user interviews, pain points, and potential version improvements, you want to develop a way to measure your progress or know whether you have achieved your goals. These are called performance measures or metrics, and they show the difference between what you plan to do and actual results. If there is a gap, then a problem must be solved and something different must be done. You will want to develop a sound and timely data collection plan that includes what data is to be collected, who collects the data, what will be the data source, and when will data be collected. Metrics need to be assessed very frequently. Here are a few examples of typical metrics: current actual costs versus estimated costs, project total cost versus estimated costs, and where are you on your timeline versus where you should be based on the work completed.
The next step is thinking through your major milestones, which are just simply significant progress points or key milestones that you must achieve, usually by a certain date. Think to yourself, what are the most important dates and most important things that you need to get done? If you have a major chunk of work, a milestone represents a time where you have to achieve something, and also a time where you will review where you are relative to your objectives. So here are examples of a few key milestones you might want to consider. First, obviously, the start and end date of the project. You could consider significant internal deliverables, key dates, deliverables due to external stakeholders, like I have to get my design to the manufacturer by this date, approvals, testing, evaluation, and contracts. So in this part of the planning session, we want you to ask, what are the most significant progress points or key milestones that you must achieve, and by what date? What significant milestones are you required to plan around? When you reach those milestones in your actual project, you will need to review, what were you trying to achieve with that milestone, and did you achieve it? Are you willing to move forward if you haven't met your objectives on that milestone? Should you be, spending time and resources on something that you might have to redo? Next, we are going to think through how you are going to break your work down. These are your tasks and subtasks. You are going to want to look at your project scope, objectives, and milestones, and begin to list out all of the major tasks that need to be executed in order for you to successfully complete your project. I would first list out all of the major tasks, and then under each of those major tasks, list out your subtasks. This could look something like this. You might be wondering, how far out should I detail all of the tasks and subtasks? You might need to only plan for what is actually known at this point and leave just the rest as broader milestones. If right now you need to do a week of customer discovery with 50 potential customers to understand their pain points, current ways they are solving their problem, etc., you shouldn't be planning out in detail product development because you don't actually know what you're developing. But you do need to know at a high level what work needs to be done. So, plan in detail at the near term and plan broadly for the long term. In Agile project management, tasks may also be built off of a prioritized list of technical developments for the project or for the product, and only detailed out if they're being focused on at that time during that design iteration. Now that you have a list of tasks that you think you need to get done, let's look at scheduling, prioritization, timelines, dependencies, and the critical path. There are a number of approaches that people take when doing their project scheduling, and you will need to determine what type of scheduling works best for you and for your specific project. Many people working in startups do what we call rolling wave planning, which is just what I referenced. Planning in detail, both tasks and timeline for the near term, and at the high level for the long term. This is a reasonable approach for people with more predictable product or service development, but longer timelines. When beginning to schedule, some people also use the technique of back scheduling, that is taking your final milestone or important milestones and just working back from there. If I need to release my app by the start of the school year, I will take that drop dead date, August 21st, 2021 or whatever, and work back from there. By scheduling out the major or time-intensive tasks back from the date that they are due, it will allow me to understand how much float or wiggle room I will have to do different things. If you have a team working on your venture, you might also consider functional scheduling, which looks at the responsibilities of different functions throughout the timeline to deliver the project or product outcome. In an Agile approach, you may take more of an iterative approach to your project scheduling. You may, at a high level, schedule out your iteration durations or overall timeline, but leave more detailed scheduling to each particular design sprint. One really important consideration when developing your timeline are dependencies and critical path. Jerry?
As you develop your project schedule, what needs to be done, you need to consider whether certain activities are dependent on the start or completion of other activities. These dependencies define the timing relationships between activities and the impact on the timeline of your project. It also helps identify the timing of critical resources. Here are a few examples of dependencies. You must wait for a freshly poured concrete foundation to cure before you can begin building on it. Or you can't start to ship a new drug to market until the FDA approves it. The critical path of a project is the series of activities that must occur on time for the overall project to meet its deadline. The critical path indicates the shortest time that a project can be completed. Each task on the critical path can only begin after the previous task on the critical path is complete. An example is when you are launching a clothing line by the holiday season. Activities on the critical path that are dependent on each other would be the design and manufacturing of the actual product. Activities on the non-critical path, such as setting up a blog or designing your packaging, are not necessarily sequential, and while necessary, have more flexibility in their scheduling. You want to identify the most critical and sequential activities and plan around those.
Beyond looking at tasks on the critical path, you are also going to want to understand in your venture what work should be prioritized and focused on now, and what work can be done in the future or isn't critical right now. There are a number of ways to prioritize your work. The easiest way to do this is to look at tasks on a matrix of urgent and important, as shown here on the Eisenhower matrix. If that is not easily done, you may want to look at other criteria for prioritization, such as value to the venture, impact to the venture, cost. You could also prioritize by effort, especially if it's just you and your venture. Actually, it's always important. It is really integral for you to learn how to prioritize. What projects you need to focus on now and what projects can be focused on later.
After you have developed your list of activities and timeline, unless you have a predetermined fixed budget, costs should be developed at the detailed activity level and rolled up for a total budget. List all of assumptions and constraints for each estimate. Obtain an expert's view or opinion if possible. Always build a contingency for problem solving, meetings, sickness, equipment failures, and other unexpected events and risks to your project. The higher the unknowns in a project, the higher the contingency. For example, a project that is much like a previous project might have a contingency of only 5%. A highly experimental project would be research and development or software development, might have a contingency of 30 to 50%. Update actual costs frequently and check against the estimated costs. A template will be made available for estimating your project budget. Now that you have all of your tasks, your timeline, and your budget determined, the next big question is, who does what? Even if it is just you, there are likely other stakeholders you will be working with, so this still is an important next step. First, list both the internal team and stakeholders involved in the project. Next, you want to identify what role they are going to play in the execution of each activity. One of the easiest ways to organize your thinking is to develop a RACI matrix. This matrix defines who is responsible for the actual work, accountable, in other words, who is the decision maker, support, who needs to help with actual work, consulted, who do you need input from, and informed, who needs to be in the communication loop. Here's an example. You will notice that this chart shows the names of stakeholders, team members, sponsors, customers, etc., and the list of activities with the role indicator in the cross-sectional cell. Our main goal with defining roles and responsibilities is to avoid duplicate efforts or avoid activities from falling through the cracks. It also helps your startup team understand what their specific responsibilities are and how others play a role in the actual activities and the overall project. Once you have identified the roles and responsibilities related to your project, it is also important to think about how you will actively manage quality in your project. You want to identify quality criteria for the end product or whatever your deliverable is, and put in place a plan to check or audit that quality criteria. We want you to think, how will you measure quality and who will measure quality? I know quality when I see it is probably not good enough. A word of warning, there is a significant cost for poor quality. A poorly produced product run can take down a company. You want to actually build quality into your process, product, or service. Using the example from before, if you are introducing a clothing line, you can build quality into your product by using high quality materials or using reputable manufacturers with a documented low error rate. The next consideration is to ask yourself, after all of this planning, how will I keep this project alive and on track during execution? As we mentioned before, you will want to develop a data collection plan. You want to know if your project is progressing at the rate expected, if it is within budget, and if it is within scope. You want to actively review these performance metrics, identify shortcomings, and take corrective action. If you have a team, frequent team meetings are essential for reviewing progress. An integral way to manage your project is to identify the aforementioned milestones, which should be built into your project schedule to help manage progress. Formal milestone reviews should be scheduled with the team, sponsor, and other appropriate stakeholders.
If you find that your schedule is in trouble, there are several methods that might help you get back on track. An example would be to shift resources from non-critical to critical activities. Other suggestions can be seen here, including contracting resources or just cutting some activities out. Another part of actively managing your project is your communication plan. Who do you need to communicate with? How often and in what manner? How often do you need to communicate with external stakeholders? What lead time do they require in requests? What is and isn't necessary to communicate with them? How do you verify that the development path is meeting what stakeholders have identified as their requirements? One of your priorities, as Jerry mentioned, needs to be a communication plan with your team. Regular team meeting, status updates, design reviews, etc., all need to happen. For your team, you will want to find a regular and consistent communication platform where progress, documents, etc., can be updated and maintained. I'll cover project management platforms in a few minutes, but before we do that, we want to ensure that you begin to schedule out time for yourself and or for your team to work on your project management.
Right now, yes, right now, go into your calendar and schedule out a few weeks of PM status updates for you and for your team. In this set aside time, you should 1, review your progress from the last week, 2, identify tasks and activities to complete in the next week, and 3, assess the status related to cost, time, and quality. If you have a team, you also want to make sure everyone is on the same page. You want to encourage cross-functional discussions and make sure there is a collective feeling of project success. This will help to avoid the throw it over the fence syndrome. Remember, always develop and distribute an agenda ahead of time to act as a guide for what specifically will be discussed, what people need to do to prepare, and provides a launching ground for determining what points of follow-up will need to happen after the meeting ends.
As I just mentioned, it's important to have a place where you track progress, metrics, where you house your deliverables, and where you communicate with your team. Luckily, there are a ton of great options for free and paid software online. This is only the beginning of the list, so you will want to do some research to see what tools best fit the needs for you and your project. But this is a good list launch point. Some of the more popular tools are Asana, Plan.io, Trello, and Team Gantt. There are also a few more traditional platforms such as MS Project. If you are just an individual and you lack comfort with new tools, Excel docs can stand in for many tools, but beware of utilizing Excel if there are multiple users, and make sure to keep an eye out for errors. Given that we aren't in person and I can't just hand these out, I have uploaded a few templates, links to project management tools, and provided an outline to this presentation on my website. You can find this at right-ventures.com/resources. We hope that in this presentation, you have thought through how you might approach and organize your work. Trust me, getting it all down on paper and making a plan can help you with the overwhelming clutter and competing priorities that are floating around in your brain. Basic project management processes, while not in my nature either, have helped me create businesses efficiently, and it helps me effectively get work done. A few final notes: project management may look different at different stages of your enterprise. Learning and pivoting are part of the startup process. Just listen to your customer and don't be too rigid. So remember, with project management, make it useful, track your progress, use it regularly, and when you don't know something, use the internet or resources like me and Jerry for help. Thank you all again for attending, and thank you to the organizers of Startup Week and to the sponsors for all of the work that went into putting this event on.
Thank you all for participating.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna just pull your screen up Hey, Grace, thank you so much. That was incredible. That was amazing. We are out of time, but looks like you've got some good conversations going on in the chat and everyone has your information. If you just want to say hi and bye, then we can close out the session.
I just wanted to say thank you all for being here. It was an honor to be able to present. And as a startup founder myself, I know how chaotic these things can get. So I hope some of this information can be applied. Again, it was only the start thinking about project management, but I hope it gave you a little framework to build off of.